the balance of the hour, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Wall Street Journal editor, the head of policy, Department of Treasury, the father of Reaganomics, syndicated columnist and best-selling author, is our guest to talk about a host of issues. But the main one is the gear up for the attack on Iran. More and more it's being green-lighted by the Israelis, the U.S. government, and when he thinks it may happen, how it can be stopped, but what will happen if they hit Iran from his research. But before I do that, I mentioned earlier at the end of the last hour, this video talking about solutions, The Secret of Oz, by the maker of The Money Masters, and we have that film available as well, by Bill Still. He's been all over the world, Iceland, you name it, where they're fighting back against these people. And this has some great solutions, you know, not a gold-backed currency, because the bankers pretty much dominate that, but a government-controlled fiat system, and basically how to bring these people to justice. The Secret of Oz, Solutions for a Broken Economy. Very important film. We sold out of this last week. We just got more in today. So get your orders in for The Secret of Oz. We have a new special running for a limited time where you can order the new films we produced, Police State 4, The Rise of FEMA, and, of course, Invisible Empire, and get a copy of Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement, free. We have several other choices you can make on Infowars.com. You can look for the banners up on the site to take you to the subsection of the shopping cart that has those specials. And your purchase of the books and videos not only gives you a tool to wake people up and to inform yourself to a higher level, but also supports this transmission and the important work we're doing here, and I couldn't do it without all of you out there. And speaking of support, PrisonPlanet.tv, we simulcast at least part of the radio show. Starting next week, I'm going to simulcast the entire radio show from there on out via streaming video with the 4-camera shooting here at PrisonPlanet.tv. And we put an exclusive PrisonPlanet.tv video up where I sent my guys, Rob Dew and Jason Douglas, to Chicago, where they let them into the drills, taking over sports stadiums, using them as FEMA camps, Polish troops training to, quote, take on American terrorists, and for gun confiscation. That 25-minute video is up on PrisonPlanet.tv right now for members. And we have this report out from Fox 23 in Albany, New York. New York National Guard unit scan vehicles for gun confiscations. They drive you through. If they find a gun, they take you to jail. I mean, this is on the news now. So the slow creeping martial law is just intensifying. And before we get into the economy and the oil spill and the Iran situation, because as Roberts predicted a few years ago, when governments and banks get in trouble, they launch new wars. Let me ask him about the police state, because he writes about that. Dr. Roberts, good to have you back with us.
Glad to be with you, Alex.
There he is, joining us via video Skype. You've written a lot about the police state, but now we have the military more and more on the streets of America, really violating posse comitatus. What's your take on that?
Well, I suppose, Alex, I just want to make sure that we forget about the Constitution and our rights. I think they realize that they've created a mess for us, both internationally and domestically, both militarily and economically. And they want to be sure that the people just sort of give up and accept their fate.
What do you think the American people's response to this should be?
Well, I think they should get very angry and be very well armed and very well organized. You know, one of the problems, Alex, as you know very well, is that so many Americans get confused about what patriotism is. And so many of them think that being patriotic means supporting the government. They don't understand that it means supporting the Constitution, and that the government is always an enemy of the Constitution. And so the people, I think they're going to have to suffer quite a bit before they ever wake up and realize that the Founding Fathers were right, that your worst enemy is always your government, because it alone has the power to break you and control you. So I think we're a long way from the vast majority of American people coming to that realization.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. People are going to have to get hurt a lot worse than they've already been abused. And, boy, I tell you, I read Bloomberg reporting 46 states are on the verge of going bankrupt. Federal regulators are, quote, ordering outside of law for large pension fund managers to, quote, invest in failed banks. Suddenly, CNBC reports that the graphs mirror the 1929-1933 Depression graph. The New York Times says third depression. The London Telegraph says depression, that all the numbers show depression. This is pretty scary to have the mainstream media now going from denying we were even in a recession to saying that we may be in a depression.
Yes, it is kind of funny, isn't it? I mean, you know, it was just the other day that we had recovery. As you know, I've said for some time that there's no recovery because there's nothing left to recover. Keep in mind that our pensions, or what remains of them, are in grave danger now because if we do continue into a depression, the government's budget deficit will become huge. I mean, it's already almost half of the current operating budget. So if you're having to borrow half of your current operating budget, you can see what happens if the economy gets worse and the tax revenues fall off more. And so what I suspect they will do, Alex, they will tell all the pension fund managers, the money managers, that they have to purchase government bonds, that they have to finance the government by purchasing the Treasury's bonds. Now, of course, with the situation being as bad as it is, the bonds won't be worth very much. And so that's how they will finish off our pensions. Alternatively, they will simply say, well, we're going to have a capital levy on your pensions. We're going to take a certain percentage of it to make up for the fact that it's been accumulating tax-free, and then they will use that money to finance the government, you know, for a while. I mean, that money runs out. They can only spend it once. So people don't really quite know how bad it's going to be. And you can see that all the stimulus programs, despite the massive size, have failed to alleviate the unemployment, and apparently have failed to stop the downward descent of the economy. So if you have the largest budget deficit in history and the lowest interest rates, and they can't stop an economic downturn, then you don't really have any policy left to use. So I think we're headed into a very serious situation that will, as I've said many times, undermine the dollar as the reserve currency, and therefore undermine our ability to import, which will affect a whole range of product availability.
Well, sir, that brings me to my next question. We have, of course, the New York Times, CNN, and others last week coming out and saying, oh, the UN says get rid of the dollar as the world reserve currency, have a SDR, special drawing rights, and that we'll still have the currencies of the world, but we're going to devalue those, and then all that will be left is this new bank-to-bank thing backed up by the carbon tax, and that it will be basically a global government run by private banks. So this is out in the open, and then it's clear that's why they're wrecking things by design, is to force us onto the wreckage of our society that will basically be this new global government. And, you know, like you said last time when you were on with us about a month ago, that clearly the government is now trying to destroy America by design. Can you speak to the SDR, this move to a new level of the Ponzi scheme?
Well, Alex, the SDR is a basket of currencies. It's made up of other currencies, including the dollar. In fact, the dollar is the largest component of the SDR. So I think when China and Russia brought that up, they were simply trying to point out that the United States was in enough financial difficulty that maybe the puppet states in Europe would distance themselves a little bit and stop supporting such an aggressive American policy in the rest of the world, and not only toward Iran, but it's also toward Russia. You know, we have Hillary Clinton in Georgia the other day rebuking Russia for occupying Georgia. Well, they don't occupy Georgia. So I think that that is not meant as a serious solution to the problem. And I think when the UN report raises it, it's really meant to call attention to the fact that there isn't a stable dollar and that the whole world relies on the dollar as reserve currency, and that the behavior of the United States government running up the massive budget deficits with wars they can't afford, with bank bailouts they can't afford.